Hello, everyone. My name is Marcela Garcia, and I'm an editorial writer and columnist with the Boston Globe. Welcome to this Globe Up Talk on community colleges in crisis, how COVID-19 and race are reshaping higher education. And we have two wonderful guests. With us is Dr. Valerie Robertson, the president of Roxbury Community College, and Dr. Pam Ettinger, the president of Bunker Hill Community College. Globe Up Talks is a new series of conversations we have launched in which members of the Boston Globe editorial board interview world-leading thinkers and unique voices who write for the Globe Ideas and Globe Opinion sections. So with that intro, let's get into our conversation. And I'd like to start a question to both of you to sort of set the stage, right? I'd like to ask each of you what has been the immediate impact of the COVID crisis on both enrollment and achievement in your respective institutions. And maybe, Valerie, we can start with you and Roxbury Community College.
Certainly. So one of the things that was very surprising to me about the whole pandemic was, first, the ability of our faculty to adapt instruction within a very short period of time. And so we were able to get, faculty trained and feeling comfortable enough to finish the semester in this remote environment. And then likewise, we were able to get technology to students who needed it so that students could finish the semester. And consequently, I really don't think that there was a huge impact on enrollment. Students were able to finish the semester. We may have had a few more incompletes, but for the most part, people were able to persist, continue their education, and the same actually with better results for the summer has been true, because the summer students enrolled knowing what they were getting into. The faculty were more comfortable, had received more training, and we were able to finish the summer semester, the first part of the summer semester, which we have 3 summer terms, successfully. So I'm very happy to report that.
And so, of course, you you still had summer school, you said, and enrollment and achievement stayed the same too through summer?
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. What about Bunker Hill, Pam?
Very similar to what Valerie was saying, in that we turned in the middle of March, we call it the Ides of March. We turned 1,700 sections almost overnight into remote or online. The work that our faculty and our staff have done to support that is just tremendous. So we're getting very similar results. The one thing that I have to say is that not only did faculty turn those classes around quickly, we also had immediately begun to turn our wraparound services and put them online so that students are able to get to tutors, they're able to get to their advisors through live chat. We called students who felt like they were disconnected. We called some 800 students to make sure that they're okay. But the one piece that surprised me is how many of our students were dependent on the physical campus itself for support, right? So things like Wi-Fi or having enough technology. In the past, because we knew that our students don't always have those materials and support at home, we built it into the physical campus. So our computer labs, our Wi-Fi labs, our food pantries. And then when everything shut down, we realized they don't have those things in the community. So we ended up purchasing some 800 Chromebooks and probably a couple dozen laptops and delivered them to students. We delivered grocery cards, like gift cards, to students who couldn't come to campus. And more recently, we started delivering groceries. So our students just couldn't get to those resources that they used to get at school. So one of the things that I realized is that our community colleges are now actually community hubs of service and not just hubs of higher education. It was surprising how deep that affected students.
Well, that's a great insight, and we're totally going to get into that more later. But before we get into that, and sort of the revelations of this pandemic crisis, about community colleges, I wanted to ask also another sort of practical question. What does the fall look like right now for your schools? What is the online learning component, and are they coming back? Are they not coming back? What are the challenges you're facing there?
So I think we are going to be at least 90% online.
Okay.
We will have some hybrid classes where students come periodically to campus to have certain experiences, and especially in those fields where you're really learning by experience.
Mm-hmm.
So any of those allied health fields, there'll probably be some more face-to-face instruction, but it will adhere to the guidelines, small classes, socially distanced, all those things will be in place. And what I've learned from our faculty is that as we think about what needs to be taught about COVID to prevent it on an individual basis is also what's going to be important for them in their field of study in allied health. So it all comes together for them.
The situation, I think, at Bunker Hill and frankly across our 15 community colleges are very similar. We don't necessarily struggle with things like dorm rooms and creating community within those closed spaces. What we do deal with is that we have to interact with the city. Like, I'm on an Orange Line stop and so is Val, right? So whatever happens outside the city or outside our doors is really the community versus our dorms. We're going to be about 80-20, so very similar with things like nursing labs and culinary labs and so on being run on campus, and then everything else is off campus. And that works the same way with our staffing. So our staffing is also about 80-20. One of the things that we've learned over this crisis is that working from home, first of all, it's better for the environment. The pollution is no longer as bad. But the fact is that we're all very resilient within the community college system, both our students and the folks who serve them. Enrollment is slow for us in the fall. And I think it's mainly because in some ways our students, we had talked about 3 out of 5 of them are parents. So in order for them to come to us and register with us for the fall, their children's lives has to be much more settled. So we're all waiting for someone, right? So once BPS or our feeding K-12 systems are more stable, I think our enrollment will become more stable, but it will be late. I think that it will be late.
Interesting. Going into these crises, right? What has the COVID-19 pandemic revealed about the students that you serve and really the state that community colleges find themselves in? And also feel free to put your answer also in the context of the anti-racism protests and the current discussions on racial justice and inequality. I mean, these really are two convergent crises, but at the end of the day, they do shine a light both on current systems and again, the community college institution. I think we just don't know what kind of students you guys serve. It's essentially an invisible population. So if you can talk a little bit about the illuminated effect of these crises.
Well, certainly Roxbury Community College serves primarily students of color. So 90% of our students identify in those groups. And everything that we do at RCC is already centered around their needs and understanding those students. We know that students really don't have the access to the resources. And just as Pam said, our job is often making those connections for students and making sure that they have everything that they need so that they can compete on the same standing. We now learning how deep that need for technology is. And again, because we can't open our physical spaces in the same way, we've started new programs. Like at RCC, we are starting a program called Rock Stars, which we will give each student their own computer. So it's almost like this has become a prerequisite for success. So we've got to make sure that every student has a computer. And so if they are a full-time student, we will make that computer available for them for the lifetime of their studies at the college. part-time students will be able to borrow the equipment, but our goal is to ensure that that is not a barrier to success. And likewise, we're starting programs with food insecurity, and again, similar to Pam, we'll be distributing gift cards for groceries and those types of things. But again, I think that what's changed is understanding what the basic needs are of our students and making sure that we have the resources to ensure that every student is successful. And it's not necessarily a matter of just equality. It's really making sure that each student has what they need, and those needs are still going to vary. But you know, with students that are parents, which students are essential workers and trying to work and go to school and balance all these things, I think that these converging crises have really just made us more aware and even more committed to making sure that our students are treated fairly and have an equal chance for success.
Pam, before you take a crack at answering the question, I wanted to ask Valerie, do you know what percentage of your students are essential workers, parents, you know, just to try to get a sense of the student population that you serve? You know, we know that most of them are students of color, but be interested in hearing the, you know, breakdown of essential workers, frontline workers, parents.
Sure. So 80% of our students qualify for the highest level of financial aid. That means that if they're working, they're the working poor, that they really still don't have the resources that they need. And what you see in our statistics is that we have a harder time retaining students, not because they don't have the intelligence or the drive to finish, but one semester work is okay, they've got a job, the next semester they've got to drop out. But they continue. If you look at our students over 6 years and 8 years, they eventually finish their degree, which is astounding when you think about all of the barriers that they have. So definitely, these are the essential workers. These are people that, when you look at those statistics about the economic differences in Boston, these are the individuals that are on the low end. They're not making the money, and they're really coming to school for that opportunity to change their lives and change their income.
Right.
So Val just told the story of my campus. I think, you know, within about probably 3/4 of our students are diverse, except we have diversity within the diversity, right? So we're a quarter white, quarter black, and a quarter Latinx. 15% Asian, and the other 10% is a mixture. So a wider variety of students, but nonetheless, all of them, 77% of them are in the two lowest quintile of income. So in the same way that, you know, Val had explained, we're in the same boat. And what I have realized over time is that education, even though we know that is going to be the venue by which they pull themselves out of poverty, education is not at the center of their lives, right? Because 3/4 of them work, most of them full-time. 3 out of 5 are parents. So it is their family, their children taking care of their own parents and working, that's at the center. So the fragility of their economic lives really drives how much they can engage with the college. So when they are engaged, we try to do everything we can to tell them that they belong. And a lot of what happens with COVID and also with the rise of anti-Black racism and the protests that surrounds it is really an inflection point in time. And it showed me, it's sort of like a crack of lightning in the night. Right, so the lightning happens and you see all the cracks and the fissures and the deficiencies. But really that darkness was created over 400 years with the beginning of systemic racism, structural repression. It is not that all of a sudden all of our, you know, Black and Latinx populations all of a sudden became deprived. The defunding of public education, the systemic redlining of education, right? All of these things happen, and what we see at this moment in time is the results. So I think it's going to take more than just any one thing that we've named to get to equity. I think this is a longer term. But Val's right. I think right now we see, for the first time we see, and that invisibility of repression, hopefully, will not be a lightning. It will be some light in the darkness that's more sustainable. It's a hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
It's there.
You were mentioning earlier too, and before we began our talk, you were saying about, you were realizing the custodial nature of your campus. Can you talk a little bit about that, Pam?
Right. So there is no doubt in any of our minds that public education in K-12 is not only about educating the students, but holding the students someplace safe and productive and important and nurturing, right? So the parents can go to work. That's why every time we change the busing schedule, everybody blows up because you have to drop off the kid in the morning. And for the longest time, community colleges are seen as sort of second chance colleges for students who don't make it to 4-year. But I think over time, because our students are poor and our students don't have the means in their family homes, we built the resources for their education at the physical campuses. Our computer labs, our Wi-Fi access, places for students to congregate and study, places for them to get basic needs, or emergency offices to help students when they run out of money for rent, our food pantries for students who have food insecurity. There's close to 50% food insecurity on community college campuses, and 14% of our students are homeless. So you built all of these resources into our physical campuses, and then COVID hit and everything closed. And that's how we saw how short our students are in terms of what they need to complete their education. So I think over time, our community colleges have become community and social hubs of service, as well as education. And I think we need to change the narrative of what community colleges are. If we shut down tomorrow, 85% of the first responders who start their work at community colleges would not exist. So it's time to think, rethink the idea that we line up behind the IVs, the first line, R1 researchers, the state universities, then there are the community colleges. I would say to you, we are actually the community of higher education, and all of the other colleges really are a small part. We have 50%. We have 50% of all of the undergraduates in the United States. So funding needs to follow proportion.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really part of the solutions that I see going into the future.
That's actually a perfect segue into my next question. Yes, I think we planned it. My colleague in the newsroom, reporter Laura Kranz, recently wrote a piece about community colleges, at the time of these crises. And she follows this student at Bunker Hill whose life has been impacted by COVID, obviously personally, but also feels very, moved to participate in the, racial justice protests right now. And there's a very powerful statement in that story from higher education experts that, she talks about this idea, in the context of defund the police and, all these calls for racial justice, the idea that you can't defund something, we have been doing it to education and especially to community colleges, right? So I wanted you to talk about what's the financial impact been. We know that you guys have, like you say, even though you serve a high share of students, the state has decreased funding for community colleges, not lately, just for a long period of time. So, and right now with the COVID-19 crisis, of course, the impact is going to be greater. Even UMass, everyone is going to go through layoffs and cuts. So what does the financial look like for you, for your institutions, and what kind of measures are you looking at taking, and when? And also, like you said, Pam, what needs to be done?
Well, I am both afraid and optimistic. I think that with the convergence of these two crises, there's actually an opportunity for people to really recognize the value of community colleges. And one thing that has always been true is that we have the ability to increase individuals' incomes, but increase the economic health of the cities in which we exist. And I think that once people start to understand the value that we can have in getting people back to work and helping people to businesses to reshape in response to COVID, retrain individuals that work already, I think that there's a huge potential for us to be funded differently. And I think that our proportion is so different that it actually makes it more affordable for the state to make an investment in community colleges and have a huge impact. Our tuition is about $6,000 a year. So if you think about that, and as opposed to funding somebody to go to jail, there's an opportunity to take that money and reinvest it. So I'm really optimistic that we will start some meaningful conversations about what funding really has the ability to change our trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It seems sometimes almost a litany to say it all comes down to the dollar. It is a very complicated formula, but ultimately it really does come down to the dollar. When I look at the dollar of investment of a undergraduate at, let's say, a private university or even a public university, you're talking about $20,000, $30,000 a year. When you look at how much it is for an individual community college student, you're talking about $5,000, $6,000. It is just simply not enough to do the kind of work that we need to do with our students to get them onto a path to a better job, to more educational advancement. And yet it is not really about the quality of the students who is able to learn, but the support that comes after it. So in terms of funding, some framework. So for the community colleges in Massachusetts, if you go back 10 years ago, the government or the state was supporting about 70% of the student's costs. And the student was paying 30% either through financial aid or out of their own pocket. 10 years hence, the student is paying 70% and the state is paying 30%. Now, there are very few sources of funding for the community colleges, right? You either get it from the state or you get it from the student, or a little bit of it can come out of grants. Because people will say to me, well, why don't you go and get some more grants? Well, paying for community college education with a grant is kind of like using Christmas money to pay rent. Right? It's not sustainable. Right. So if we're going to look for economic development for the state, and everybody tells me that the community colleges is the backbone of workforce development, which we are. If we're relying on our very poor students who are in the lowest 2 quintile of income to pay for their education, the state is not going to get a workforce, right? My fear is that after the last Great Recession, the community colleges at the beginning were cut 15, 20%, which is a lot when you look at our budgets that are 85% of it is people. When you cut that much, you're going to touch people, and we're a people business. So we haven't recovered from the 2008 cut, right? And now you're saying, okay, well, we may cut you at least another 10 to 15% again. What it comes down to is what's happening that you're seeing in Laura Kranz's article. Even the very, very well-to-do and small colleges like Emerson is suffering. Our colleague Springfield Tech is going to be losing programs and people. When you have a technical community college that's the backbone of manufacturing education, going in that direction, we're going to be in trouble. I worry about our nursing program and our allied health programs and all of these programs. So I know what our competition is. Our competition is healthcare. Our competition is transportation. Our competition is infrastructure. But at some point in time, you're going to need somebody to work in healthcare. You're going to need, somebody to work in IT. You're going to need to have somebody to work in all these fields that are the backbone of economic development in Greater Boston and in Massachusetts. Yeah. So we need to choose. And yeah. I'm saying, you need to choose us now, because 2 years from now, we're going to be stripped of the bone. There won't be a community college system to help.
Yeah.
It sounds extreme, but I think that's where we are now.
Yeah. I wonder if you have any thoughts on why has it been so difficult politically to advocate for funding? Is it because there is no, core, constituency that can go to the State House every time there's a budget fight? Is it because, why? And is there a state perhaps that does it right in terms of investing in community colleges that you can think of, a state that, is sort of like the leader in this, or are community colleges across the nation suffering from the same funding issues?
Well, I'm going to say that what you said is part of it, is that this is a constituent that's not fighting for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the whole Black Lives Matter may change some of that. But I also think it's in part because of systemic racism, that when you are serving a population that's not valued, it's very hard for you to fight to convince somebody that they are valuable. And, unfortunately, in Massachusetts, because we are an education state and there are so many prestigious institutions here, it takes money to fight. And, unfortunately for community colleges, we don't have any fat on our bone. And so we are not always advertising. We're not always, we haven't had the dollars to fight the legislator or even kind of get our ideas across in terms of ways in which we could be of service. So, I think that's why I'm encouraged that this is a time where people will be able to see us in a different light. It may be the same message that we're conveying, but now all of a sudden it makes more sense, and you can see the connections of how systemic racism has worked against institutions as well as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think about this a lot, because in the past, and I agree with everything that Val said, we simply don't have a constituency with power and voice. But it's also the mythology that goes on out there that says, oh, well, community college students don't do well, and therefore performance funding is a large part of it. Show me you can do it, we'll give you more money. What COVID and the racism protests have shown me is that we talk about performance, but we don't talk about history, right? And I'm going to quote Michael Collins here. Michael Collins is the CEO of Jobs for the Future, one of the large nonprofits, educational nonprofits that's based in Boston. And he wrote it in a chapter in a book recently that the mythology about how good education is for social mobility is based on probably three key benchmarks. One is the GI Bill, right? So the GI Bill, after the war, folks came back, it was wonderful for public education, but only 5% of Blacks participated in the GI Bill benefits. And then the next interval was the Truman Commission that created saying, expand the community colleges. But the idea was open community colleges, drop our Black and brown students in with no support. So it created the narrative of you can pull yourself up by your bootstrap, which is false, with no support. And, if you can't do it, that means there's something wrong with you. Yeah. And then very recently, even with the creation of the Pell Grant with financial aid, financial aid is nowhere close to be able to support a true cost of education for our students who work. So if you have all of these policies that are systemically racist, and then you use those policies to judge the performance of our Black and brown students, and you say you don't do well and therefore you don't deserve more money, it is a vicious circle.
Yeah.
Unless we get to the history, we're not going to get to the issue of why aren't we funded. We aren't funded because our policies, the narrative that's created for us is racist.
Yeah.
That's as plain as I can put it.
I want to go back to what you said about the performance, because that's the other piece that even, those of us who've worked in community colleges, we play into that without, realizing it or not. And so, community colleges have had this whole system of developmental education. These are the students who are not ready for college work. And our college did an experiment with our math program where we had a track where you had to take as many as three developmental courses or remedial courses before you were able to take that college course. This is time, this is money, you know, you have to take them in sequence. So that's a year and a half before you can get to the college level work. We had our faculty did a pilot study. They found that if they increased the amount of time with the instructor, that those students were able to persist. And so we're now seeing a 40% increase in student performance based on them being able to take those college level courses right away. And you think about what that does to somebody's confidence, where they are taking these courses and they're not making progress. And it's a way that, you know, we cooled out the aspirations of those individuals that really need it the most.
Yeah.
And it's not based on ability. And when you see that students are able to persist, you know, you have to even question the work that you've done as an educator yourself in instituting some of these policies. But this has been the general thinking. And until this Black Lives Matter movement came about, I think we were all really so, I don't know, enculturated in thinking that these things were right, and that, you know, anybody would argue that developmental education was put in place to help these poor students. But that's not the case.
No,
and
right.
I think that that's the hope, again, in being able to reevaluate these things and understand that everybody has the ability to persist.
Yeah. Just very quickly before I move on to the next theme or question, is there any state that funds community colleges, you know, right or enough that you can point to? Or is this sort of a, you know, nationwide issue?
You know, I would say this is a nationwide issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, you know, even when you think about how people, and Pam described it, how people think about community colleges, that you don't deserve it, or these are the people that can't do any better. I think that that translates into everybody's thinking about funding.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Unless, Pam, you want to say something, I can move on to, perfect. So I want to ask about a successful initiative, early college or dual enrollment programs, which is basically, you know, community colleges partnering with high schools to give their students, while they're in high school, the ability to earn college credits. And it's been shown time and again that this can have a dramatic positive impact in post-secondary completion rates, particularly for low-income and Black and Latino students. So can you each give an overview, share some successes or challenges of your, you know, respective dual enrollment or early college programs, and talk about the impact that, you know, suddenly the budget uncertainty, you know, is threatening that funding. I know the state has made an effort to increase some of this funding. The Student Opportunity Act, I think, had more in it for early college, but of course, again, now we don't know what's going to happen. So can you address some of these issues?
So I'm going to actually put in chat some stats that I just received.
Mm-hmm.
And so the framework on this is also, in the old days, dual enrollment was for children of basically a privilege, right? Because if you're going to a high school that you've done all your APs and you want to get some early college credits, community colleges or colleges scrape the top and skim the cream. And those students go and, you know, get some extra credits when they have time. But the more current understanding of early college and dual enrollment is that everybody should have the opportunity. So the equity lens by which we're doing dual enrollment in early college is very different. So here's early data. This is a project coming out of the Smith Family Foundation grant that we did over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And about 3/4 of our students are Black and brown, and 20% more enroll in college compared to the regular population. And you can see, you know, the stats in the chat. It is pretty impressive. And one of the pieces that works for us financially is that students don't pay for early college or dual enrollment, yet their credits transfer. Right. So the savings going from last year at $1 million and a projected savings of $5.5 million actually helps on the budgeting end if we
Yeah.
do it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
We're finding it to be inspirational. In the same way that we looked at developmental education students and believe that they are lagging behind, we also don't put enough aspirations inside our secondary students who are Black and brown and
Right.
believe that they can get to college.
Mm-hmm.
And the obvious fact is that they can, and they do well. So I think this is one of the few silver bullets that we see. There are not many in higher ed or in secondary education for that matter, but this may be one of them.
Wow.
Well, we certainly haven't had as large a program as Bunker Hill, but we've had just as much impact in working with our students. We generally receive a small grant from the state, but we serve probably twice as many students for which we are funded. And so we use institutional dollars to increase the number of students as much as we possibly can for our area high schools to enroll in dual credit, where they're receiving high school credit and college credit at the same time. We find, though, that one of the things that is harder to quantify is that it's such a big difference in confidence. When a student knows that they can do the work, they start to envision that college is for them. And you look at Pam's statistics that she's posted, 20% more enroll in college. Those are individuals that would have just been lost to a low-income life and not pursuing college because they didn't believe that they could. I think that that's the most powerful piece that's there. And then the other piece of it is, and this is kind of takes me back to my own college experience, there's a sequence of courses. If you get out of that sequence, there are a lot of majors that are not for you. And so you've got to take those prerequisites in line in order to complete, or in order to be eligible to go into pre-med or some of those more highly technical degrees. And students who are involved in the credit at the high school level get a leg up on that whole process, so that when they come to the 4-year school or 2-year school, they're ready to get into their major and get done. I think that those are the things that are really powerful about dual credit early college programs.
Before we get into the questions from the audience, just real quickly, do any of you have a sense of what the funding for this program is going to look like in the next year yet? Is it being threatened, and how much? Do you have any sense?
I think everything is still a bit up in the air.
Yeah. Okay.
So it will save us a lot more money than it costs.
Yeah, that's what you've shown. I mean, you're basically doing it, two for one. I mean, it's you're educating high school kids already and preparing them for college. It really is a no-brainer that the state should be, doubling down on the investment. But for now, I'd like to turn to questions from the audience that were submitted. And I'd like to invite Marjorie Pritchard, the Globe's OPED page editor. She's joining us to share some of the questions we've received.
Thanks, Marcella. Hi, Pam and Val.
Hi.
You both talked about the challenges that you're each facing, and one of our listeners would like to know, what are some opportunities for community colleges to collaborate? Would it be to lower costs, but still have your focus on your strengths?
I think for RCC, one of the things that has really helped us tremendously is the great support that we receive from the business community. We have advisory boards for all of our academic programs that are leading towards individuals joining the workforce. They're able to advise us on curriculum, provide internships for students, opportunities for employment. And I think that there are very many opportunities for partnering on keeping students enrolled and keeping our workforce vibrant. So that's one of the largest opportunities that I see.
Yeah. And I think within the community college system itself, COVID has done something for us that we hadn't done before. I'm seeing Valerie probably 2 days a week now.
Yeah.
Because we all 15 of us meet at the end of Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, and we have helped each other coordinate the work that we need to do in this very, very emergency environment. We're support for one another. And we certainly, share more practical things like share buying and share services. And it's really interesting how these questions are posed about collaborations, saving money, and that we can be even skinnier than we are. I can tell you, we cannot get any skinnier. The collaboration is a lot of consultation and doing best practice together. It really, I cannot imagine the system running any better than it's running now. We're pretty efficient. So I think one of the things that we can do coming out of this discussion is that how can we help one another craft a different narrative and a different understanding of what community colleges are all about. We're undervisible and I wouldn't say undervalued because people who use us understand our value, but we're definitely not as visible as we can be. And we're hoping that this will change.
Somebody else was asking, how do you spread the word about community colleges? You're doing such great work there, but you just answered that. One of the other questions is, with what we've seen in the past 4 months as a pandemic shifts our economy, especially employment and education, the community college system seems uniquely positioned to help regions rebuild and restart. What training is necessary for the new jobs that arise, and are you prepared to be able to provide that for the students? I'm sorry.
Well, I think that's, again, some of the things that we do best. One of the initiatives that Mayor Walsh has really been behind is reducing our carbon footprint and building more smart technology. And there was an opportunity where some of the business people that really kind of got together and said, we're really having a tough time identifying people to join this new field. And there are no programs that train individuals to work in this industry. And so they, seeing the solar canopies that we had erected over our parking lots, they thought, well, maybe RCC might be interested. And they came in and helped us to design the curriculum that trained the individuals that are going to be necessary in their field. I think that that's a prime example of how we will continue to work with our business partners to design new programs, or where there are shortages in terms of people selecting that as a career. We have the opportunity to, even with dual credit, as we were just talking about, start to get students interested in these careers and understand what the workforce needs so that students choose those curricula.
Right. So a colleague of mine in Maryland says the community colleges were born for this. Mm-hmm. This is what we do. I think one of the consideration is, what are the major industries that anchors the greater Boston area, right? So we're always looking at the healthcare. We know the IT and professional services is part of it. And the other piece is actually the creative economy, which is not only the performing arts, but also gaming. And computer technology based on gaming. So we're looking very deeply into that. And in fact, we just had a conversation with a new startup in the area that talks about virtual reality, right? Virtual reality in healthcare, virtual reality in the various segments that are beginning to grow, and that we would not necessarily start a whole new program, but have capstones on top of our IT programs so that it's stackable, so students can gain extra skills to be viable in this environment. And of course, I think everybody's looking for CNAs, and I think the community college system is coming together to make sure that we have one program that applies to everyone. But I think there are some basics too, right? We are, at least Bunker Hill is serving at least 4 or 5 gateway cities or rival cities where we have large immigrant populations that are potential multilingual workers. Yeah. That's their asset that we're going to grow. So we've started and we'll be accrediting our language institute that will do ELL, that will then stream those as workers into the pipeline. So yeah, there are constantly pieces moving, and all of us, all 15 of us really, are thinking about different segments in different cities, because what they need in the Berkshires is different than what we need in Greater Boston. the process is the same, right? You connect with business and industry and you build those platforms together.
Well, that's great. I think we're getting short on time, so I will pass it back to you, Marcella, but thank you both, Pam and Val.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marjorie, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this Globe Up Talk. We would love your feedback. Please visit our website. If you go to globe.com/opinion/uptalks, you can find a whole catalog of videos of past conversations that we had. For instance, if you missed yesterday, we had a fantastic conversation with the CEO of Boston Children's Hospital, Sandra Fenwick, who talked about how COVID-19 is affecting children. And this is where you're also gonna find this conversation in its video form soon, but please send us your ideas or feedback. Finally, keep an eye out for our upcoming Up Talks in August. And thank you so much, Pam. Thank you so much, Valerie, for your valuable insights. We appreciate it a lot. Thank you.